Well, hello and welcome to the wrap. This is a show rounding up all things Zwift from the last week. We're talking racing, we're talking events, we're talking fashion, you name it, all things Zwift. We are live on Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. If you haven't done so already, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and comment throughout. We are going to be watching chat as well. A lot coming up on this episode number 70 on this Thursday, November 16th, 2023. And it is actually that date for everybody today that is on the podcast because Anna is obviously away, as you only see Nathan in front of you at this moment. If you're just listening, she's on a break this week. She'll be back next week for episode number 71, but we've got some awesome guests for you today. Our guests today are going to be Ard Kessels, the founder and owner of Kogel Bearings, and Greg Abbott, the president of NeXT Esports, presented by Enshored, who is sponsored by Kogel Bearings. Going to be pretty awesome to hear. I've got a lot of info actually up front about how they've been working together, and that this partnership that they have is innovative. It's not from what I've heard so far. I'm pretty excited about that. We'll be bringing them in pretty quickly here in just a moment. Also, we've got a new Coach's Corner articles that have been going up on the website. Definitely want to just highlight that, and we'll talk a little bit at the end of the podcast about those articles. I don't have Alex on, but Alex Coh has been putting in a good amount of work writing new articles for the website, so definitely check that out over at ZwiftCommunityLive.com. There's some some pretty cool stuff. We've got a new workout of the week coming from Gabriela Guerra herself for some Zone 2 training. Our jersey pick of the week is actually a new submission process coming from you in the community. The Backpedal kit was submitted by Nile Batey. You can, or maybe Batty, he can correct me in the comments most likely. But if you head on over to ZwiftCommunityLive.com as well, we now do have a little button where you can submit your jersey, talk about what it is, etc., and it may end up on the podcast. So now, if you did not know, this is also an audio podcast. You can download it anywhere that you do download your podcast. Go ahead and search up The Wrap and Zwift. It should come up pretty quickly. You can always find those also over at ZwiftCommunityLive.com on the podcast tab. That's about it for our intros, really. So today, there's not a whole lot else to talk about because today is going to be a super deep dive into all things extra watts. I called this in the title, the Extra Watts episode, because I think that's really what this partnership between these two entities really is all about. So I'm going to welcome in our guest right away here. We do have Greg Abbott next to me, the president of NeXT Esports, presented by Enshored. Greg, welcome to the program. How you doing?
Good, Nathan. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. And then Ard Kessels, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, owner of Kogel Bearings. Correct me if I'm wrong. Welcome to the program, Ard.
You are spot on, Nathan, and welcome. Yeah, I took the call from our production office, so people can really have a look on the inside of what we do here.
Yeah, I like it. In the background, as we were in pre-productions, I could actually see people walking around doing a little bit of work on desks. You know, it looked like you're actually right in the middle of where everything is made. So let's get right down into this here. The first thing I want to do up front is give an idea of, because I think a lot of people who watch this program, they're going to be familiar with NeXT. They're going to be familiar with the esports team. They're going to know Greg a little bit, or get Zwifty over on Instagram. And we'll get into where things are at with NeXT right now in the season in just a moment. But I want to just do a quick overview of what is Kogel Bearings and what do you guys do? What are you all about?
Absolutely. So in a very short history, I used to be a bike mechanic in Belgium. And there my biggest frustration was in ball bearings because my customers would always go right out on wet roads. It's a given in Belgium. Like on Sunday, you don't check the forecast to see if the ride's happening. You just check to see which jacket you should bring. So whenever I was sending out these $8,000-9,000 Wonder machines, they would come back 2 months later with all the bearings rusted out. And like I said, big frustration because it was always the mechanic's mistake. It was never the guy at Specialized or Cannondale or Pinarello that thought a $10,000 bike needs 50-cent bearings. So after a while, my wife, who was from Chicago, took a job back in the States, and she offered that I had to come with her. So we did so. I sold my shop, and I needed a new project, and I was like, I'm just gonna solve my own problems. I'm gonna make the best possible bearings for bicycles that we can make. So that's the Shark Tank version of it.
And quickly then on that front, is that where are you originally from? That's an interesting, like, you were in Belgium.
Yes.
So are you from Belgium?
I am. I was born in the Netherlands and moved to Belgium for work. I worked in fashion, and I have a degree in fashion management. And
you're perfect for this show. This whole show came out of fashion.
Absolutely.
I want to know your rating
know
at
we
the
were
end.
going to pick jerseys, but I'll have a look at the quality of the stitching on the jerseys.
That's awesome.
So yeah, from there, I was at one point I was not really happy in my job, and I was like, you know what, I'm done. I'm starting a bike shop.
So
yeah, so it happened.
And then you moved, and then did the bike shop thing in Belgium, and then you moved here to the States with your wife, and and you ended up in El Paso, Texas. That's where you guys are at now.
Correct. Yes.
Gotcha. I know El Paso mainly from the Puzzler and some awesome other really cool mountain bike events that are down there. Is that like your main, like, from you personally, is mountain biking kind of where things are at now for you in that area because of where you're living?
For me as a rider, I have a history as a mountain bike racer. So I used to race mountain bike marathons many years ago in Europe, and as you know, Netherlands and mountains they don't collaborate very well. So most of my races were in Germany and then the south of Belgium. From there, this was the time when I was working for a boss, and I had 15 hours in the week to go train. And then after I became self-employed, something had to give. So I'm racing or I'm riding recreationally now. I sign up for the occasional outdoor race, but with no intention. So my history is in mountain biking. When I had to shop, all of my customers were road cyclists, so automatically I went where the money was. Now I do some gravel riding as well, so I don't discriminate against any bikes.
Right on. Awesome. Well, that's a great intro to who Kogel Bearings is and what you guys are up to as far as a top view and what your aims were up front. But then we'll get more into the nitty gritty for all those extra watts that people are showing up into the podcast for a little bit later. I want to talk a little bit to Greg now as well, because we haven't talked to Greg. It's got to been over a year or maybe spring. Maybe in the spring we had a little bit of a conversation.
Yeah, it's been a while.
It's been a while.
I think I popped into a race broadcast with you. I don't think I've been on the wrap yet.
Okay, gotcha. So it's been a little bit since we've seen you on the ZCL. Just want to introduce, give us short history. We've talked a lot to NeXT. We've had Barney on. We've had a lot of different NeXT representation here. But you're the guy behind the whole scene, behind the scenes, doing the work in some ways.
I'm the guy that does a lot of the behind the scenes work, but I'm not like the only guy. It's really a team, a collaborative effort. I think in the big picture view, NeXT was born out of the pandemic because there's huge influx of people like either discovering or rediscovering Zwift, and you had a community and teams existed that couldn't just deal with the number of people who now wanted to race, right? And a lot of these sort of Zwifting orphans found each other and found that magic to build some camaraderie and started this thing, and just sort of kind of blew up from there. It accelerated really quickly.
So in your email to me about Ard and what was going on with Kogel Bearings, you said they were one of the first people you talked to when you got NeXT going, right? And so give me, hold on, before we go there, give me an idea of why, what were you thinking? I'm going to start an esports team and here's the people I need to talk to. Boom, boom, boom. I'm going to check off these boxes in order to make this happen.
So we started the esports team and then realized what gaps we had and what kind of support would be really useful. So NeXT formed before we had talked to Ard. And I knew Ard, he did a stint in Washington, D.C., where I'm based, and I got to know him on group rides and knew his products. And, I had a rapport with him, so I wasn't starting from scratch. I started with the people that I knew. I think what really highlighted the fact that there were lost watts was when I went from total Zwift noob to trying to abide by the best transparency standards. You have all the dual recording data, and inevitably you see discrepancies between different power sources. And the question is, well, are those power sources just measuring differently, or is there a reason why one might read higher than the other? And we usually are seeing the power sources that are closer to the point of application, i.e. your pedals or your crank, tend to have a slight advantage over a trainer. And why is that? There's a drivetrain in between, right? This is where there's opportunity for friction to take away some of that force that's just not getting measured. So I don't know if it's free watts so much as it's not losing. It's you generated that force. We just want to make sure that it all gets counted, right?
That was devil clicks. I'll admit that title's devil clicks. That title's 100% whoa, free watts, okay.
Right. So knowing that Ard had these really high precision ceramic bearings, in bottom brackets, that's one of the biggest drags on your drivetrain. If you have a cheap bearing, it's going to have a lot more friction. So you're just adding more force through it's just never going to make it through the chain to be measured off of your cassette on the trainer. And then he was also doing the oversized derailleur cages, the larger cogs, the larger pulley wheels. And that's all part of this bigger equation on how you can reduce drivetrain friction. So I just went down every rabbit hole of everyone who's doing work in this, read all the friction facts reports, looked at everything that Ceramic Speed was doing, what Silica was doing, like all the tutorials on how to wax your chains at home, all those different things that you can do to start like improving your drivetrain efficiency. And knowing that I had this connection to Ard, I gave him a call and we put up some data. I had a bunch of his stuff already, so like did some natural experiments. We could show that if you took a dirty drivetrain and then just cleaned everything and put on like a ceramic bearings and the oversized cages, we were taking like consistently about a 2% discrepancy between the two sources to nothing.
Wow!
It
wow!
became like, yeah, and that's on average. Like it's not going to.
Let's back up real before we get into too much of that. Real quickly, I want to talk a little bit more about NeXT and a little bit more about like the difference there. Like, let's just hone in on when I set up a team. I've run a couple of teams. The first thing I think about is, okay, I need bikes, I need tires, you know what I mean? Like, I think about all the outdoor things. This is definitely very different specialization than it shows. Like, oh, we need to think about, you still need some of those things, but you're not quite as interested in those, rather like, because up front there was ideas amongst, one of the esports teams up front, I think got sponsored by, it was a computer. Like there was a computer manufacturer that was sponsoring one of the esports teams with some nicer gear to get the best FPS they possibly could, right? So there's a difference. Yes, in real life cycling, people are looking to save watts and do these things, but there's definitely almost like a hyper focus on that, I would think, in this space, because that 2% difference can be a winning or losing move.
Oh, for sure. And like, so if you compare it to outdoors, there's plenty of people like time trial specialists that want to have like the most efficient drivetrain possible, where they're, playing in very small margins, or, track athletes, same thing. But if you think about how many other variables they're also going to account for, right? So body position, the weight of the bike, the aerodynamics of the bike, the tire pressure, the wind direction, your position relative to the path. There's all these other variables that just aren't in the equation. So it puts an outsized impact on the ones that you can control. So we just really thought that was like the best way to get like an immediate gain.
Another example, sorry to interrupt, but just another example would be like, well, there's a big focus on what clothing you're wearing, right? We have indoor clothing because cooling is so important, or like there's different things you're kind of after for performance that makes sense to sponsor an indoor team, right?
Yeah, we actually should talk about that with our clothing sponsor, because we help build a line just for indoor stuff with them. More ventilation and rapid cooling and evaporation, and then also there's crazy light as a result by not having zippers or pockets, because you don't need them inside, so you save 100 grams on your Grand Prix weigh-in.
That's nice, actually. No, like I try and find the lightest. That 100 grams, you looking at that when you're weighing in.
It's all. I hate to use marginal gains; it's such a lame term, but like it's there, like, and it's all, on the straight and narrow. Like there are advantages to be gained that are, well within anybody's control. It's just, are you going to pay enough attention to the details to take advantage of them?
100%.
The things that we get, the efficiencies that we can get out of just improving drivetrains, like it's winning or losing, right? Like if you're getting 2% more in that, and you're winning by 100th of a second, like that matters.
Yeah, and 10 watts. That's across the board. That's about 10 watts or so. You know what I mean? Like that's a pretty significant amount of power.
It's pretty significant. It's not like it just is like 2% at like your 20-minute power. It stays 2% at your 15-second power, right?
Across the entirety of the power. Yeah, across all of them.
Yeah, that's 2% at 1,000 watts is like pretty substantial. Like you can lose a lot.
Yeah, interesting. Well, okay, so that's a quick overview of how NeXT got into this whole area. Maybe we'll leave the update on how NeXT is going and all that other stuff about the team at this point with ZGP and the women's team. We'll talk about a little bit at the end of our. We're already getting in the nitty gritty here of the drivetrain. So let's go into then. We've got an overview a little bit of like what this is about, but what exactly then? I'm going to go to Ard on this. Are the methods that you would look into for your initial products? I do hear that there's a wax product maybe coming down the line here, and we'll leave that probably for last as it's a future product of offering. But like you said, that this wasn't necessarily about just speed up front, though. That you first started developing around durability, it sounds like, Ard.
Yes, absolutely. So the idea that we've always had, me as a mountain biker in a very wet climate, I realized that the demands on bearings between a road cyclist and a mountain biker are completely different. Where road cyclists chase the lowest possible friction, very similar to what e-racers are doing. Mountain bikers, if you make a bearing that's very low friction, it's going to be pretty much open to the elements. So for mountain bikers, that would mean if they're in a very wet, muddy race, like they might have the lowest friction on lap 1. But then once you get to lap 5 or 6, the bearing is full of mud and grime. Like that is not the same bearing. So they're always happy to give up half a watt for putting tighter seals on the bearings and gaining some durability for having the fast bearing still on the last lap and not only for the start sprint.
Gotcha.
That is something that I developed our line around. We were one of the first companies that offered different bearings for road and off-road use, and from there, that gives us something to work with. Once we work with the top athletes, we can really look into what they're trying to achieve, and most importantly, what their service interval is. Because
So
everybody wants less watts, but if that means that you have to take your wheels apart and service the bearings every day, that is only for the highest of paid athletes.
So where are we all putting these bearings then that you are producing? Like, what are these spots on the bike that you were thinking about when it came to durability? And so there's that. And then what are you thinking about when it comes to speed? Like, those seem like two different kind of places that we're talking about then.
Exactly. So the first part of our line was bottom brackets. 2014, when we started, was the explosion of what I call bike ways to cut a hole into a frame. So we went from just having BSA and Italian threaded bottom brackets to now having 14 different standards. The traditional way to solve that was just to have a bearing that fits and then just add a stack of spacers to it to make it fit on the crank. So we started by making bottom brackets that had a unique solution for every possible crank and frame combination, just to promote stiffness and reduce creaking, because creaking was something that was happening a lot in those years on bikes. Ball bearings are in your wheels, not as relevant for e-racing, but definitely for outdoor riding. And then we make derailleur pulleys, and in about 3 years we make oversized derailleur cages because they reduce friction in the chain.
Ah, interesting. I was always wondering what that was about. So bearings and where those exist, and then there's another product that is these oversized pulleys that also have bearings inside of the pulleys as well. Help
Correct.
us understand that. So what actually is happening there when it comes to the drivetrain? Because that's going to be our focus today too, I think, really, is how does that help reduce friction in the chain by having that oversized pulley?
The idea behind it, and this is research, so was this as a product has been around since 2010. Like if you go back to the Tour de France, you can see Alberto Contador and Andy Schleck racing oversized derailleur cages. It didn't really take off until 2015 when Ceramic Speed launched this, and it became a big hit among time trialists and currently recreative road cyclists. You'll find them anywhere. The idea behind it is, if you can imagine that a chain has to run through the tight bends in the back of a bike, articulating a chain costs energy. Like there's friction in between the plates. So the idea behind it is, if you have to wind it around a small 11-tooth pulley, that chain on every link has to articulate a lot more than it does if you run it over a big 19-tooth pulley. So
Got it. Okay. Yeah, so
reduction
that makes
in the
sense. You
articulation is
have like a basic leverage change is what you're kind of up to on each one of those
exactly
chain links. Okay. Gotcha. Interesting.
That same thing happens if you see the gear combinations that time trial specialists use now. They're using like a 60-tooth ring, that they're never going to use the 10-tooth cog. The whole idea is optimizing the center of the chain line with the biggest chain ring that you can fit with the gear range that you're most likely to use in the middle of the cassette, so that you don't have it bending really far to either extreme end of the cassette. So it's like reducing friction laterally and then bending less in the chainring itself.
Gotcha. Interesting. Okay, cool. So those are the main places then, it sounds like, that we're looking for these savings, is that you're aiming at the bearings, you're aiming at the larger, help me out here again, guys. What do we got on the back here?
Pulley
wheels. Thank you. And then
Yes.
also the bearings inside there. Is there anywhere else then that we're also looking for?
The chain itself.
Yeah, that's about it.
The chain itself, and that's
Yeah,
that's a wax, is what you're talking about there.
Yeah,
or you're
that's
talking also
right.
like. Okay, got it, right on.
And also choosing the right chain. They're not all equal.
Okay, gotcha. And so when it comes to this, you know, how do you go about this then as a indoor esports specialist, Greg? Like, okay, Ard's got these products for you. You just put them on the bike and you're good to go. Like what? Like, is there a lot more complicated than that? Like, what's your process here?
So, well, you know, because I'm just the anal retentive mechanic that I am. So for all like at least our North Americans who can easily ship me chains, I do a lot of waxing for our North American based guys. All this takes some maintenance, right? Like the gains are fleeting. Like, so everybody wants to put on a really fresh set for like worlds or nationals and things that really matter. So
how many chains are you sending? Like, how many chains are you sending to the, like, are we talking you're waxing like 15, 20 chains then and mailing them out to all of your athletes, or? Yeah. Got it.
Yeah, or at least everyone that I can't. It's hard. I can't ship to Barney very easily, right? Like it's not.
South Africa or New Zealand. New Zealand. Got it.
The cost doesn't work out quite as well. But basically anybody in the U.S. If they want me to do a chain, I encourage everyone to send me pre-season a whole bunch of new ones, and we'll treat them all and send them out. Like the ideal way of doing this is to have multiple chains prepped and then just swapping them, and then when they need a reapplication, doing them all at once. So you're not constantly having to deal with the rigmarole of cleaning and waxing all the time. But what this kind of looks like in practice for our guys, Ard supplied bottom brackets based on whatever the rest of their bike specs were. So they got the low friction seal bottom bracket that fit their crank and frame combination, and similarly the oversized the Colossus cage and the pulleys that go with it. So had to make a big spreadsheet of what everybody was running and sort out what parts that they needed. And then with chains, I could just really push everybody to check them frequently. The other thing that's going to destroy your efficiency is if you wear them out. The upside to waxing is it tends to improve your durability. It's great. Actually, everything we talk about today seems like the durability and speed do actually kind of go hand in hand in this arena, which is great. I've gotten extraordinary life out of cassettes and chain rings because I'm really anal about checking chains frequently and not letting them get dirty. And that's really it. Just keeping things clean is the way to keep friction from robbing your watts, right? So don't let dirt build up. Wipe it down regularly. The bearings themselves, they do have a service interval. So we'll occasionally get sets of replacement seals and pop them out, clean it off, pack in new ceramic grease, and reseal everything. It's not just set and forget. So it's an advantage that's out there. But the question is, are you going to put in the time and the attention to detail to take advantage of it?
So, okay, there's two different roads I want to go down here. One is making a difference between indoor and outdoor, and then what the suggestions are, because somebody might be like, okay, cool, I'm going to get into this. And then there might be different needs that you have across bikes, right? There might not be your indoor setup might have a little bit different, or your outdoor, your mountain bike or your gravel bike. They're going to be different needs across all of those. We were kind of talking about that a little bit. But first, what is the testing that you've done? It sounds like you've been working really closely to really get some data to be able to share across. And we talked about that 2%, but did you actually go through like I put the bottom bracket on, this is what I saw. Then I did a wax chain and this is what I saw. Then I did a pulley and this is what I saw. You know what I mean? Did you actually do kind of more of a scientific, like controlled groups
really
around this stuff?
Yeah. The difficulty is to get a good data set with just like the 10 or so guys that we were supporting with all this stuff. And everyone having a slightly different thing made it really hard to control every variable. But there were a few people who like they didn't have a Colossus compatible cage, so we could like use that as the data set that eliminated what that contributed. There were several people who had bottom brackets already, so they had like that as like a data point on its own. So like we had a couple of instances to see that. What I typically saw, and this was basically just like scouring our team's dual recording data, knowing like what day they did that change, and so you could sort of see it in action. You get an immediate like great bump, and then it would fade over time until you like re-wax your chain or re-lubricate it, any of the things that you would need to do to maintain the system. And so you'd see like a bump for any one piece. But if you had like two pieces, you pretty much get all the way to your 2% difference. And at 3, it becomes a little bit of noise. Like if you take a lot of friction out of one part of the process, there's less reduction available to have the next piece take away.
So right? It feels like there's like a tipping point of friction reduction that actually suddenly like, okay, once we get rid of this much friction or this much tension to kind of loosen things up and everything's smooth, it's a little bit more minuscule. It sounds like from what you've seen.
There's less heavy lifting for the new improvement to do. Like there's just less friction in the system now for them to have its impact on. So like it is a thing where you have a diminished return on every step that you put into it, but it's not nothing, right? And I think if I were to suggest what like makes the biggest difference, it's the chain articulation on the chainring size. Bigger chainrings for indoor is like a huge advantage. It does have an impact with the pulleys, but the big difference between the chainring and the pulleys with the reduction in articulation is that the chainring is under tension, and so it's going to have a lot more force. The underside of the chain pass only has as much tension as the spring on the derailleur is applying. So that's where you get chain slap. Like it's not under like a constant tension. So the heightened part of friction in the pass happens on the top end of the crank. So like those are the big thing is like having like less chain bend. That makes the most immediate difference. And then the waxing on top of that is huge.
Gotcha. Awesome. Huh. And then, okay, so then if somebody's like, okay, this sounds great, is there different like, do you guys have this situation where you need support and you get different products then for completely, here's my indoor setup, and then here's my outdoor setup, and then there's a differentiation of which products that you're running across that? Ard, I might want to go to you on that about like, if somebody's going to go for this indoor experience, versus their outdoor experience, would you suggest different products there?
We could. It depends on what you want, and typically this comes back to service intervals. The main thing that we hear from indoor cyclists, they will call us at the end of the season when spring is coming, and they're calling in for a warranty because their bearings failed, and they're like, all I did was 6,000 miles indoors. And it's like, have you seen how much sweat you run over that bottom bracket? There's a blog on our website that I wrote that is it's called Your Toxic Sweat. Your toxic sweat is killing your bike. So that is something. Environmental circumstances, you can say, oh, it's never seen rain, but yeah, if you've been spraying body rain over it for 6 months, same effect, and probably worse because it's all salty. So the one thing that I always go to is like, be 100% honest with yourself. If you've been riding your gravel bike in the mud and just happily ignoring it because it wasn't really raining but it was muddy, then tell yourself that. Pay attention to the service intervals that are needed. If something is crunchy, don't ride it for another month. Like, fix it immediately. And with that, once you are at that level, then we can talk about reducing that buffer of security that we will put up for most of our consumer products. that we take away for our pro athletes.
So a buffer of security. Can you
Yeah.
like define what that is for our viewers? Because I think that term
Absolutely.
right there is really crucial for what you're talking about, this differentiation between probably price points and what the product actually is doing and looks like.
Absolutely. So the best example for this is like we sponsor some world-class downhill mountain bikers, and I know this might be 100 miles away for people watching this show.
Well,
But the
no,
key points
I'm mountain bike background. There's plenty of mountain bikers. There definitely
Well,
plenty. Yeah.
love it. So let's take Aaron Gwynn, one of the most highly decorated downhill racers in the world that we sponsored for the last 5 years. The way that their team is set up, it is one rider, one bike, one mechanic. Aaron Gwynn's mechanic doesn't work on his teammates' bikes. So the bike is John the mechanic. He literally says, "This is my bike." Aaron gets to ride it. So downhill runs are 3 minutes. So when the bike leaves John's hands, it's gone for an hour, and it comes back, and he will strip it down to the bone for tomorrow for race day. When you do that level of service, I have no problem of saying, you know what, you guys, your races are decided by 100ths of a second. So please go use our low friction road bearings on your downhill bikes and go play in the mud, because there's nothing you can do in 3 minutes to break a bearing. So
Gotcha.
once you get to that level of service, I say, you could run it without seals. I don't care. I know you will fix it. For indoor racers, clearly Greg's team, everybody's at the spearhead of things, and everything has to be optimized. And that is where we are looking for all the optimal gains. Like we could even look into replacing the grease that we put in our pulleys for consumers, and washing that out and putting like a very thin oil lubricant in it, with the knowledge that means that those pulleys are good for a couple of hours of riding, not for 6 months. So
gotcha. So the buffer,
if you're
the durability, there's a little bit of trade-off there in the bearing side of things, it sounds like.
Yeah.
There's a little in that side of things. If you're looking for more speed, and that's what it is kind of across the entirety of the industry in some ways, right? Like I've had to replace how many power meters that are crank-based because eventually that crank is going to wear out, and it's a part of the crank, and now I have to send it back in, and it's a light piece of equipment that just wears down easier. Greg, it seems like you want to interject something here.
Just physics, that's just how materials are, right? Like you're gonna that trade-off exists in every industry and every product made, no matter what. It's not just bikes.
Yeah. So across all of these, of course, my old XTRs, they always wore out quicker. Like my everything across the board, everything was just going to wear out quicker. The lighter that it gets and the more efficient that it gets. It's a good point when it comes to the physics for sure. So the durability thing's interesting. The sweat thing though, and the durability there, is there like a product that's specific to upholding to conditions? Like, do you have a product that's not just about speed, but that's like more about like, I just want things to last like a really, really long time and not have to mess with it as much. Is that also a solution that you offer?
We have a product that we sell as our installation paste, and it's a paste that's actually developed for the offshore industry. So it is really literally designed to be submerged in salt water.
Oh wow.
We use that. We tell people when they install their bottom brackets and they're creaking, like we don't give any guidelines up front, like you can use any grease or material you want, but if you come back to me and says it creaks, my first question out of my mouth is, did you use our aquaproof paste? We as a reference to Jens Voigt, we call it "shut up grease" in our office. So much that we printed it on the bottle, and he hasn't sued us yet, so we're good for now.
Shut up grease. I like that one.
The benefit of that product,
non-efficiency use of that is to pack it around your headset for the indoor season. Like, like the grease inside of your headset bearings it's sealed in there. So if you can use that in the cups and around all the headset assembly, you're just going to create like a waterproof barrier to keep from just dripping corrosives into your
I learned the hard way. I learned the hard way on that one for sure. Like I ended up at the end of one of my seasons early on doing a lot of heat training indoors, sweating everywhere, puddles upon puddles. And then all of a sudden I go to like take and I didn't touch the thing. I go to take the bike off and like my entire headset's not only ruined, I don't even know if my fork's ever coming out. Like, I mean, it's just, you know, just rust all the way through. It won't turn anymore, anything. Like, okay, this is done. So definitely something. And I hear that you're even thinking about a sweat product. Is this like something in order to collect people's sweat? No, you're not trying to collect the sweat, but like Greg, this was an idea that you had, or what was going on here?
Oh, Greg, he's talking about the sweat gutter that we tried to develop.
Oh, no, I'm just saying, like, I use the paste for installations, and like it's like anything that you want to keep water and salt out of, it works really well. And I think Esport has a lot of that. Use it on your faceplate stem bolts, like anything that you're just going to be dripping onto. Just like and it's such an easy solution too, right? Like you don't have to be a great mechanic to do that. To just plop a little bit of it onto threads and retighten it. So like highly recommended for everybody. Like it's just it's just going to save you a lot of trouble when you want to take that thing off the trainer.
Yeah, I think Nathan was referring to the VO strips that we tried to work with.
Yeah.
We are using for a couple of years. There's a company called VO Strip, and they make basically a sweat gutter that you put under your helmet, and it basically makes the sweat run down the side of your face rather than into your glasses. And it works extremely well. Like I live out in the desert. There's a good amount of sweating, but then when I was in DC, it's the same temperatures, but it's super humid. Sweating goes to the next level. So that was a product that works really well for my face. So we tried to manipulate it for a while to see if we could somehow wrap it around the frame where any sweat or liquids that run down your down tube and down the seat tube, we could channel it around the bottom bracket and just go straight to the ground. But it was one of those things that got us very excited, and then the execution kind of we couldn't figure it out, and we bailed it. But
how do you capture? I mean, it's a cool idea. It's a cool idea, but how do you capture all of the sweat? Like, how do you find all of the sweat?
It was really just trying to funnel it so it just ripped the way you wanted it to. Like it was never going to collect it but this was a thing that I think mattered a lot more for press fit bottom brackets. If like when you thread a cup in, you then have that like a little bit of space where like the cup is contacting the frame, and like the surface tension of the liquid like wants to follow the backside of that, and that does a pretty good job of protecting the frame. But if you have a press fit bearing just like right flush against the frame, there's just not a whole lot to keep it from just slowly seeping into your seals.
That's a good point. Good point. So, all right, let's move into, so we got the bearings, we've got the pulleys. Now let's talk about waxing. And we also have a question coming in, actually, how many watts are we actually talking about here? And this does seem like one of the main places too, that a lot of this is happening. Something people aren't familiar with. I'm not sure. I mean, your entire team is now using wax chains. And it's a process. I've started waxing my chains in the last year. And I just want to hear, like, what are you seeing in the differences here on the pure watts? I put out a number earlier about like, I don't know, 20 watts or something like that at the upper end. I mean, is that the kind of numbers you're seeing? I mean, to go from...
I mean, let's do the math, right? Like if we're seeing about 2% on average, if you have a 350 watt 20 minute, that's 2% of that is 7 watts.
Gotcha. So yeah, you're
like
looking at... Is that 2%? Is that I'm doing the math right now.
3.5 would be 1%. So
the main thing that we learned from working with Greg's team, because as a company, we are not very big into data and into friction testing, because we know how to make products really well without ever sending it to the lab. Our bearings are good, and there's a ton of data around there where you can base your assumptions around. So we can make it 98% lowest possible friction just by engineering. And to push that last 2%, we usually have to make compromises that we're not willing to do for consumers, which is basically the example I always use is I can make our bearings lower friction by just taking the seals off. Nobody thinks that's a good idea. So I think the main thing that we learned, and this is something that is specific to esports, one, it's a quite controlled environment compared to riding outdoors. But the double data collection at the kicker and at the crankset is incredibly valuable for us. And because of the scale of a 10 people team, it gets very, very accurate. And the thing that we learned from Greg mostly is that that number scales. It's not, you're not saving 3 watts, you're not saving 4 watts, you're saving a percentage of your output. So if you're coasting at 100 watts, then it's 2 watts. But if you're slamming out of a corner in a sprint and you're putting out 1100 watts, it's 2.2 watts. Sorry, 22 watts.
Gotcha.
So that is something
that's across an entire race over and over and over and over and over again, the entirety of that. So a lot of times people go 7 watts at one moment, big deal. But really, when you're talking about 7 on a scaling number of percentage, then you're talking about a huge amount of energy, actually. If you were just going to put that in kilojoules, think about the difference in kilojoules on a 45-minute full gas effort, right? Just in pure energy expenditure.
And we can just do that. We could just record off of a kicker and off of a freshly waxed system separately from that, and then just see what the total kilojoules difference is.
Yeah, I mean, and I mean, when you start talking about these, your balance power, your prime power, right? Like, and you start talking about what's left in your prime power. One of these, for those that don't know the prime power calculations now, that's this measurement off of all of your critical powers that then come up with like what's left in your tank off of the past efforts that you've had. That might be the measurement, because we talk all the time about this measurement of like your 1 minute power, your 2 minute power, your 20, and all of this across the entirety. But if you start thinking about what's left in the tank, and that it's literally it'll give you a bigger number to look at and be like, oh, that gives me that much more left in the tank to work with, or energy to expend throughout the entirety of a race. That puts it into a different perspective, I would think. Greg, I wonder what you like. That's not something you've looked at yet with prime power?
I'm not familiar with it. It's not something that Alex is my coach. I'll have to bug him about it.
That's what we'll do. We'll bring that in. It's a number. We've talked to a few different. There's a couple of different algorithms out there for it, and there's a couple of different companies promoting it. One of the early on companies, I'm trying to remember the name of it. Actually, we've had them on. And somebody's going to come in chat and be like, Nathan, how do you not know this? But a lot of people put it on their streams, actually. It actually is also if you're using Sauce, it'll show you your prime power as well and what may be left there. I'm not sure if it's doing a correct calculation, but it's also what they use for the power checks on your tests. So like when you do the Zada test, it gets you a total energy expenditure left, right? Like, and it's one of the ways that they test as to whether or not you could be able to do something or not be able to do something, not just off of those.
Do that after an hour of racing, sort of.
Exactly. So
cool. Yeah, that's neat.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Well, now I'll have to figure out whole other ways to poke and prod at these things to see what the effects are.
Yeah, it's good. So, what's going on? So it sounds like you guys are doing testing though for wax. Like, is this something that's coming down the road for Kogels or not?
Absolutely. We are looking into optimizing chains. It's the perfect addition to our oversized derailleur cages. Typically, when people take their stock derailleur cage off and they put an oversized one, they need a longer chain. So it's a perfect blend for us to say, hey, why don't you, while you're optimizing your pulley set, why don't you just optimize your chain while you're at it? Mm-hmm. And since with waxing chain, it's like the first run that is the most painful one, because you have to strip off the factory grease and it's multiple steps. After that, the maintenance of a wax chain is relatively easy. Like in theory, you could get away with a jam jar with some degreaser and a crock pot, or not even. Like if you use it indoors, Craig can correct me here if I'm wrong, but you could just take your chain, put it in wax, have the dirt come off, and wax it again with a new crock pot.
You're still going to get dust, like if you're in a basement or a garage, like it's not a sterile environment. You're still going to get, it's just not going to be the same as you would get actually in an outdoor environment. So it's still there, but maybe it takes a little bit longer to fully penetrate. My dad on his indoor trainer's got a cat that likes to rub up against his bike when he's not using it. So he gets cat hair all mashed into the chain. So, there's different things that could happen in an indoor bike. So I guess it's, sort of rider and environment dependent.
So for those that aren't familiar with waxing the chain, the process is usually a crock pot at home. You throw the wax in there, heat it up. Usually you're looking at about 200 to 210 degrees Fahrenheit is what I'm getting at too. And then throwing it in there just for 10 minutes. You're making sure that that's clean, but you're not just throwing a chain that comes off the shelf. Like there was a whole process that they just talked about where you've got to get all that factory grease off. You want to talk to that and why a little bit?
Which one of us?
Greg, go ahead, Greg. Greg, you can go ahead.
Factory grease is it's really good for preventing oxidation on the shelf, but it's not really good as a lubricant. And you can dive into any chain waxing article on the internet that'll tell you the same thing. So it's pretty heavy, and then as you get dirt in it, it mashes in and basically becomes like a polishing paste, which is just going to grind away at the metal of all your moving parts. So it's grinding away at the rollers and pins of your chain, and that's going to also then create that gunk that can build up on your pulleys or on your cranks. Like that's lubricant and dirt and whatever else it picks up while you're riding outside, mixing together and creating this paste that just grinds away at your stuff. So like the first step is just getting rid of that. And it sounds simple enough. A lot of people have cleaned off their chain after a ride or before lubricating, but you really have to penetrate, because that stuff is deep inside of those rollers. So it's not just a surface cleaning. And so to do that, you have to really use pretty harsh chemicals, or an ultrasonic cleaner, things that really will penetrate deeply, and then make sure that you get it out. Like you don't want to get residues left on there. And there's some specialty products you can get now for stripping a chain that will leave it where that metal won't have any residue left on it, that will prevent the wax as a lubricant from binding to the metal, right? You have to really prepare the metal to be able to accept it. If you have any traces of a petroleum-based lubricant still on the metal, the wax just won't harden to it. It's going to just flake off, and then you basically have an unlubricated chain. So everything about making this work is in the prep. Dumping it into a crock pot and hanging it dry is really pretty easy. It's making sure that you have it surgically clean before it goes in. That's where the real art is.
So let's talk. Ard, do you want to talk a little bit to then that sounds like so much work, whatever. But the reality is I haven't had to do a whole lot of work actually once I'm at this point. My chain system is the cleanest it's ever been, and I've had the least amount of dirt around and the least amount of grease and it's just silky smooth now all the time. And once you're there, if you're willing to get to that point, you're kind of set. So what Ard, and Ard, go ahead, Ard. I want to hear your take on that.
I think the main benefit of buying a pre-wax chain is because you can go on the internet and look up any company that sells this. They're not making the chain. They're selling a chain that's made by Shimano, SRAM, Campiolo, pick your favorite brand, and then treating it. And by that treatment, the chain all of a sudden goes from $50 to $150, which sounds ridiculous. But if you think about it, what it does for you for that $100, you don't have to work with harsh chemicals that you have to bring to the container park afterwards. You are giving it out in the hands of somebody that does it, because like Greg says, it is extremely meticulous. The wax it just doesn't mix with petroleum products. So if there's anything left, then you're just going to get the worst of both worlds.
Gotcha.
The treatment is something that would be very easy to outsource, and after that, the maintenance of it is something that you could do at the house with some basic cleaning materials and a crock pot.
Yeah, and I can't speak to that enough. Go ahead, Greg.
I was going to add that it's a value proposition too, because when you keep your chain cleaner, you're also not grinding away at your drivetrain. And chains are pretty cheap compared to cassettes these days, right? Chain rings, I've got the SRAM axis where the power meter is built into the chain ring. I wear out my chain rings, I have to replace a power meter, right? So if I can extend the life expectancy of all those much more expensive drivetrain parts by paying an extra $50, $60 up front for a treated chain, that's going to contribute to the longevity of everything else I have. I'm ultimately going to save a few $100s by investing a little bit more up front.
And we're talking in kilometers or miles. It's significant. We're not talking about an extra 1,000. We're talking an extra 5,000 to 10,000 use out of these parts. Correct? If I'm wrong, and that's 6 months of riding or more.
I think you can get an extra year out of it if you're really good about checking if you check your chain regularly for like wear indication and replace it when it's at 0.5% wear. Don't let it ever get past that, and you change them 3-4 times a year. You see basically no visible signs of wear on the cassette as long as it's a decent cassette, right? Like a really like a low end cassette is going to have a softer material that will wear faster. But something that's like a relatively good hardened material that stays clean with a chain that's not worn out has a really, really long life if you treat it right.
So those who like to really watch their checkbook when it comes to this, and who doesn't when it comes to the cycling stuff, like it's expensive stuff that we're talking about here. There's a huge motivation just from that point of view that you're talking about pretty significant. I mean, you get a cassette lower end, 170, I would think at the lowest end, maybe 200. Okay. And then
a Force cassette is still like $250, something like that
now at this point. And then if you're going into the high end, Eagle stuff's like 560 or something like that, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Like if you're at like a transmission drivetrain, like it's nuts not to try to take care of it, right?
Yeah.
Like you just waste so much money, especially if it's something you're going to ride in harsh conditions.
Interesting. Some of the chatter coming through here over at the YouTube. Reich Media is saying that easy 40K out of one chain and ring set is what he's or she is letting us know. So plenty coming in here.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's amazing to see.
Crazy life out of these things. If you just take the time to like prep it right or get like a higher end product from the start and just monitor. Like a chain checker is a cheap tool and they're really easy to use and it can save you a ton of hassle down the road.
So, okay, let's talk a little bit. Let's swap up here to NeXT and what's going on with NeXT right now. And I mean, you guys got a wax product. It sounds like we didn't go all into that. Like, well, yeah. So how is NeXT testing and bringing to the table alongside of you, Ard, and your work to get this wax product happening? Like what does that look like, that process? Is that like, is NeXT directly involved, or like how does that all play out?
I think Greg has been essential in researching and developing his own protocol. So when it comes time for Kogel to release that product, the simplest thing was flying Greg out to our headquarters. There's a ton of research you can do. Like you can learn 99%. So
he's there right now. He's actually there right now, and you guys are doing stuff.
The Kogel logo in the background.
Since the Kogel logo in the background. That's not up at Greg's house. He's actually in El Paso, and you guys were working on wax stuff. It sounds like
my wife picked that out.
So Ard, how's that going?
So far so good. It's been fantastic.
Yeah, we had a lot of time with this team today. We were setting up like a workstation and processes, and Ard is working really hard on figuring out a proprietary blend. We'll get to dive into if you get to the point of waxing, the differences start to become much smaller, but they're not all the same. Like the friction facts have dove into like who does the best wax, and you do enough trials, you can find out which one is going to do the best, and you can probably assess that on both the durability and the efficiency standpoints. Like those are two different goals that you might have in mind, or at least like you want to find the balance that matters for you. So we've got really good processes, I think, starting to set up here from the time we spent, and I think there's a little bit more time to go into how to make it uniquely a Kogel product that hits their preferred balance of efficiency and durability.
Right on.
Exactly, and that is something that typically, like, I'm by no means an expert on greases and loops. So the products that we sell, we did not develop them. We found fantastic products in the market, and I think that will be the way forward with the wax as well. Like we're gonna work with a manufacturer. We're gonna first see which one of the known manufacturers are delivering the best product, and over time we can work with them to deliver a proprietary mix that is maybe better suited for what Kogel does.
Ah, cool. Gotcha.
But once you get into the high quality waxes, the differences in the gains are very, very minimal.
Interesting. Right on. So you were talking January, a little bit after that. I think it was one of the dates you were aiming at. So if you guys are keep checking out the website, everybody. It sounds like there'll be some announcements coming up in the near future there. I want to throw a curveball at you a little bit here, Greg. Powder. I work with Ceramic Speed directly, and I do use their race powder. I saw Barney in front of his chain before his ZGP doing something to it. I was wondering if he was putting powder on or what he was doing. You don't know?
You might have secrets for me. Unfortunately, like I said earlier, getting stuff out to Barney is a challenge, right? Like, so we had to just get him his bottom bracket and pulleys. We wait to consolidate when we were getting his clothing order, try to get everything in one single package because shipping to New Zealand is like not easy.
Gotcha.
So this is one of those things that unfortunately we're not able to support for him on a regular basis. But we still have like the knowledge and resources and everything within our team conversations to help get everybody's stuff dialed. So he benefits just not quite as much as some of the domestic guys can.
People are already looking for the 10% off code. I think you got some people visiting the website.
Love it.
Awesome.
So currently, guys, we are running crazy Black Friday deals on our website. So for this reason, normally when I appear on a podcast, we show up as like, here's a 10% offer. It's like, it wouldn't do you any good. Just all of November, check out our website. I'm sure you'll find something to your liking.
Yeah, there you go. You see it right there. Not another Black Friday sale. There we go. So it's right on there. If you head on over to Kogel .cc, it looks like is what you're looking for there. Kogel.cc, and you'll be able to go get those deals right now. What's going on with NeXT though? How are you feeling about the season? We've kicked off. It's a couple of months in now at this point. We're getting into mid-November. What's changed up and where are things at for you, Greg?
Well, I mean, obviously the big thing is we have a women's team this year, right? That's the number one biggest change at NeXT, and it's gone really well. Liz came over and sort of spearheaded our efforts on building that team. And it's a really, it's something we're committed to in the long run. Like, we want to make sure that we're building a team, and it's going to take some time to bring everybody up to the same level of expectation that I think we have for our men's team. The challenge that I think we've seen mostly in developing a women's team is that the existing pool of Esports athletes is pretty small. And so I think the opportunity in that is to try to recruit outside of the esports space and sort of bring people into our fold, right? Show them that this isn't just a training device, that it's something that you can do that has community and camaraderie and fun gameplay. Ard's team was sitting in the room with me directing for the women's race today, and they're like, it's like watching Call of Duty, right? Like seeing like a director talking and the chatter and everything that's going on. Like, I think seeing behind the curtain, I think is a really compelling thing for a lot of people who don't know much about what we do. And I'd love to find more ways to bring that to the forefront, because I do think it really highlights the human element and like the way that everybody is really into this together and working as a team. On the men's side, like we're full throw into the Grand Prix season. We're a little bummed on the first round annulment. I think we were one of the teams that, we saw the problem, but also didn't think it had an outsized impact on the event. So I think it was, solving a minor problem with an overcourse correction. So that's a bummer, but, like we'll carry on. It's going fairly well. The guys have been racing pretty well. The changes in formats create like a much more interesting dynamic than even a couple of years ago, where it was sort of just flood the zone at the finish line. So I think the races are more interesting now than they've ever been. We've continued to try to keep everybody racing at a high level. You guys are going really well. Everyone's keeping an eye on what the world selection is going to look like. USAC put out some criteria, and then it didn't really align with how USAC was going to run the event itself. So I think there's going to be an update there. I think everyone's really curious.
And that's the timing. Was that a timing thing, or was that
It's just timing. It's that nobody knew that it was going to be a 20-person per gender in-person final in Abu Dhabi. So like the sport selection criteria, like gave an automatic selection to a previous podium. So then that's Jackie Godby's would be an automatic selection as it is. And then they were going to give automatic selections to national championships that would be crowned in early January. And so like the curveball here is I think they were figuring Worlds would be in February still, and now they're going to be in October. And like, is that the right selection criteria?
Yeah. That's a big question. Big question. I got a question there. Go ahead. I'll let you finish. Go ahead.
And then they also had like a process for discretionary spots and how like they would be somewhat supported. Like there would be some out-of-pocket expenses for riders, but now like who knows how many riders per nation are actually going to like. How do you get to the final? How are they selecting who those 20 people are? Will there be like qualifiers that you're still representing Team USA, but like not going to Abu Dhabi, right? Like there's a lot of questions about the format that I think it's keeping. We're just having to stay alert to what that looks like.
Gotcha.
And in the meantime, we all got to, at least all the Americans are keeping an eye to jumping into the Echelon Racing League that'll be on Saturdays. Because
that was my next question. Yeah, is like, okay, so, we've got Zwift Grand Prix. Everybody knows about that here. What other places are you focusing in on as well? Multi-platform, it seems like all the teams are kind of spreading their wings out a little bit more to kind of feel out where they need to be and when, and be very light on your feet. You know what I mean? Very flexible.
Yeah. I think at the end of last year, the principal complaint you would hear across the the Grand Prix teams was wanting a consistency in schedule, because it seemed like every week there was a new thing that popped up that seemed like you had to do it. Right, like we didn't have a full year's calendar to plan around. So it's like, nationals for USA and Canada got a month lead time to know that it was going to happen, and it was like right before Worlds, and the Grand Prix was like, it didn't end before Worlds. Like it had another round after that was over, and all those things really mattered. And it's just like it became this cumulative fatigue of having to race all the time, and it seemed like there was always like a lot of pressure to have to go to these marquee events. And like the absence of calendar coordination is the biggest problem, I think, with the spreading to multiple platforms. I'm all for more platforms and different avenues of racing, but not knowing that Worlds was going to be in October before the season even started wasn't great, right? Like because now you're looking at athletes having to plan for multiple peaks. I think
it's almost like a whole nother season too. Like it's almost kind of like you're going to go outside and do your thing or whatever, and
I think people will be carrying form into if the traditional sort of North American winter months remain like the primary esports season, you'll be carrying form from Worlds into the start of that. But then can you maintain it? If there are things that matter, if the Grand Prix still ending in February or March, like how long can you hold that peak? If the different nations are going to offer their national champions jerseys in January, but you're wanting to win Worlds, are you going to forgo a chance to also do that? It really would be great to have some sort of coordinating across all these different things to set a calendar that would let the athletes make a reasonable plan.
Yeah, at least consistency. I don't have a big of a problem with gaps and stuff, but just the consistency and the gaps making sense. That's in the timing.
Or just having just knowing what they are with enough time to plan. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's going on you all the time, and then you're having to make adjustments to plans you've already made. So that's a thing that the whole community is dealing with. That's not unique to NeXT. And beyond that,
Zwift games. What do you think about the Zwift games?
Yeah, well, we need more details. When are the events? How are they gonna do? The qualifications up and the verifications and all the things that we'd want to know, because it's obviously enticing. I'd be curious to see what that actually the guaranteed biggest prize person Zwift turns out to be. We're all ears. I think
I bet you are. I bet.
And then I think the depending on your specialty within what's cool about it, I think, is having the different specialties. So the epic distance, the hill climb, and the sprint events. So for someone like me who's going to focus on Masters Nats as a goal, and then I'll immediately get head straight to the weight room for the sprint series. It just sort of changes your training priorities if you're going to focus on a specific title in the Zwift games.
Yeah. All right, well, let's go ahead and transition a little bit here real quickly, guys. I wanted to involve you in our weekly jersey pick of the week. This was submitted by Nile Batey from Backpedal, and he submitted the Backpedal kit. For if you didn't know, those watching, you can submit your jersey pick of the week or your just jersey pick that you've designed and put in. It looks like he matched things up pretty nicely here. One of our big things is always accents. I do like Backpedal's been around a long time. Wahoo Cole's a little bit they're around that same community. Ed Laverick, I think, is a big part of this whole scene with Backpedal. I think he did pretty nice job. The red and white, the accents with the white there. I mean, it's kind of an only indoor kit though. You know, when it comes to fashion, our fashion expert today is Ard, I think. And I mean, if somebody were going to put this this whole kit together, I mean, you're not going to be riding this one outside too much, I would think, if it's going to get any kind of dust or dirt with all the white, though.
I wouldn't choose to ride it outside. If you're not going to get it dirty, you're just going to gray it out in your laundry in the next 2 months. So what I love is the big white back panel with a big slap rover logo on it, which is perfect for recognizing the riders in the electronic peloton. So I'll go with that. I love it. Is this team from a certain region? Are the mountains representing something?
UK. They are from the UK, but I think a lot of them are hill climb focused. Backpedal has a lot of hill climb championship focuses, I believe. Niall is in chat, so you can probably chat and let us know. That's a good question.
Perfect layout then.
Yeah, I think it's good. What are you giving it? What are you guys giving it? I'll go with Ard first. Out of 10. How many out of 10? Now, we've never had a 10 out of 10. I think there's only one, which is the glitch kit, that's ever gotten a 10 out of 10. Usually we're pretty conservative, just so you know. But you can give it whatever you want to.
Understood. I'll we have to reserve the 10 out of 10 for the next kit, so I'm gonna give this one an 8 out of 10.
There we go. 8 out of 10 from Ard. What are you thinking, Greg?
I'm not as high. I like the palette. It's good colors, and Ard's point about having an easy to spot logo is a big deal in esports. But the thing that and it's probably my own bias, but do you remember in the early 2000s there was a lot of apparel brands that did semi-custom stuff. If you had a small club that couldn't afford to do a full custom run, when that was a little bit harder to do, and they'd have these a red or a green or a yellow version of it, but there'd be a big blank white space in it where you could plop in your own logos, but otherwise fit into a template. And that's what it reminds me of.
Gotcha. Yeah, I get that. So what do you give it on a 10? What are you doing?
I'm 5 or a 6, somewhere there. The colors are nice, it's solid. I don't have there's no fashion crimes to it, but it just reminds me of something that I always thought of as just not quite fully committed to doing it right.
Yeah, I gotcha. Right on. So looking here, I like the white handlebar tape. I'm going to give a little bit of a bump just because how much work got into the accents here. You can really see that now. Put in some work there with the shoes, the socks. The white handlebar tape is in there as well with the white gloves. That really matches everything all together. The other thing is it really does stand out in a pack. So, it will give that crew. There isn't many kits that look like this in game necessarily. So with that red and that white specifically. So it has a little bit of a Radio Shack feel, even the old Radio Shack kit, just a tad. So yeah, I'll give it I'm going to go 7. I'm going to give it a 7 for everything that's going in there. Nice one. Thanks for the submission to Nile for sure. Definitely love that. So, thanks for your little, the fashion addition there to our interview with you guys. What's, what's coming up next, there with, what's coming up next. What I want to ask the last question is for Ard, when you started into all of this, and you look back right now at what you started in, and one of the main teams that you're working with, does it blow your mind? Like what? Esports, video games? I used to own a bike shop and now I'm having this guy fly out to our business to do things with a video game and he's DSing at my place here and it's actually a part of our products. You were dealing with mud and grit and sweat in the real world. You was literally the nitty gritty of the real world. And now one of the main things you're supporting is this esports world. I just wanted to get your perspective on that, Ard.
Absolutely, and I love that, and I love that we get to work with so many different athletes. Like I said, I went from mountain biker to recreative road cyclist / racer. From there, something that really opened my mind was working with triathletes, because somehow they just speak a slightly different language, and I get it. People knocking out 30-hour training weeks and doing running and swimming. I went to Kona a year ago, and it just blew my mind. And this is the same with esports. It's like when Greg was bringing this up to me, my first response, I think, was like, "What? You trying to be the best at practicing, or what's going on?" It was so far away from my universe. And then he's like, why don't you just log on to YouTube on Wednesday evening, and you'll see there's 2,500 people watching, like, whatever, Wednesday Night Worlds. And I was like, oh. So that is, I love when that happens. So
Nice.
and once I do open my window to this, that just I love to nerd out on stuff. So this is just a whole new avenue where we can nerd out on.
It seems like, innovation is always where the new things are, the things that are kind of outside the box. And Greg, I think like this whole world is definitely a little bit outside of the box, isn't it?
Like we all found new things to put our time into during the pandemic, and then it just it grew, and no regrets. We found something we love doing. We put a lot of time into it, and we're finding ways to enjoy it the best we can.
Heck yeah. Well, hey guys, I really appreciate you guys taking the time and coming on. Now, make sure everybody, if you want to check out all things with Kogel bearings, head on over to Kogel. I believe it is Kogel.cc. They do got a November sale going on right now, and those savings, maybe not extra watts necessarily, but those watt savings, you can find those over there. And I'm looking forward to what's going on with the new wax that you guys are helping to develop. And we look forward to seeing NeXT Esports as well, and what's coming up for the rest of the season. But I really appreciate you guys' times coming onto the program, and we'll talk to you soon.
This was awesome.
Thank you very much.
For having us.
Yeah, no problem. Cheers, guys. Well, guys, it was our guests. Really appreciate them coming on in. Again, Greg Abbott, Ard Kessels, and telling us everything that they're up to when it comes to getting the most out of their esports experience. Real quickly here then, next up on the program here, we're going to just highlight quickly what we've been doing with Alex Coh and the articles that he's been writing actually for the website. They're pretty awesome. He actually did an introduction to an introduction. It was the name of it. For getting into racing on Zwift. You can head on over to ZwiftCommunityLive.com and you can find that. But these new articles, he is doing an amazing job of going in depth. And you'll start to see as you read these articles why he is kind of that meticulous Zwift coach, why so many Zwifters actually employ him to help get as much marginal gains as you possibly can. In the same way that we're hearing from NeXT and everything that they're doing and why they started working with Kogel, well, it's the same kind of idea here is why you would work with this specific coach, is because it is so about all those nitty-gritty details that you can find specifically in the indoor world. And I would say that he did the introduction one to Zwift racing, then he did a structured training article, but this last one on hemoglobin mass and the benefits that you can find from different ways in order to make adjustments to your training or different methods to try and increase that are 100% legal, by the way, but all of the ways that you can go about that. And even some of the ways that are very specific to indoor training, he actually gets into as well. So definitely head on over there. One thing I also want to highlight for the Coaches Corner, so that's going to be our main thing with the Coaches Corner this week, is that go ahead and check out those new articles over at ZwiftCommunityLive.com. We also have uploaded a workout of the week from Gabriela Guerra, mainly focused on Zone 2 training. It is a 2-hour workout that kind of presses the envelope a little bit for your Zone 2 training. So a lot of times we on the program have talked about Zone 2, how it works, and the reality of wanting to kind of almost shift into that next gear, but not get there. To get to that highest possible point that you can of burning the most amount of fat and the most amount of sugar, that is really what this workout is aimed at and how she had written it. So you can find that right now, actually, in the workouts of the week. We do have a folder over on the podcast tab, actually, on ZwiftCommunityLive.com, where you can find all of those. So head on over there, click on through. You'll be able to download the workout of the week. It is a ZWO file. If you haven't checked out how to load a ZWO file into your Zwift, head on to Zwift Insider. They'll tell you all about how to do it in order to put custom workouts into your Zwift. Well, that's going to be it, guys, for us for this week. Usually we do a what am I up to for the next week? What is Anna up to for the next week? I am mainly just recovering, actually, trying to get back on the bike. We're still a little bit injured from the bike, so from the back injury, but we are kind of on the other side of it. I did a TTT today, not full gas. It was a practice for next week with Team Italy. The fitness has dropped off a little bit. I got dropped, I think, almost. They did hold up for me, and we had to regroup quite a bit. So we'll see where things go. I'm going to try and get on the bike and just see if I can put in a normal week of training between now and the next Zwift Grand Prix next week. And if I can, we'll go ahead and race. Hopefully, we're on the other side, at least, of just having to completely rest. It's essentially been almost 3 weeks out of training, only with doing a little bit here and there to try and ride. And each time, the back has said, oh, we're not ready yet, but I think we may be at the point where we can come over to some actual training. But I want to just say thanks, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll be back next week for episode number 71. Again, we've been live on Twitch, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Make sure to hit that follow button anywhere that you, or subscribe, comment, like, anywhere that you are watching and you have, or rewatching. Again, you can download this as an audio version over at ZwiftCommunityLive.com on the podcast tab. Big shout out. We did bump over 13,000 subscribers on YouTube. We do have some big goals there. Can we hit 14 before the end of the Zwift season or higher? It'd be amazing if we went even higher than that. And we really do appreciate all of you. We'll be live again next week, Monday, for the Z Racing Series, obviously the ZRL for both Europe and Americas, and then with the BL13. Be on the watch out for some pretty awesome new things that we are going to be working with, some new partners, actually, to the racing streams, to be bringing you all the cool esports insider info, I'm going to say, that you would want. So be on the watch out for that. And again, don't be shy. Connect with us out on socials. We always are watching for that. And we like to reshare all of your stuff from all of the races throughout the week. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. And from only me this week, as always, ride on.